Hi, everyone. Welcome to Wine.com Experiences. I'm Gwendolyn Osborne. Today we have a very special tasting happening, more than European wines, savoring stories featuring the European Union. So we'll be taking a delightful journey through the vineyards of Europe with the fantastic Nicole Muscari, a fellow wine professional and well-traveled European wine enthusiast. So welcome, Nicole.
Hi everyone. So I am so excited to be here, pop some bottles and tell some stories that really highlight the quality, authenticity, safety, and sustainability of some European vino.
I know. And today we're going to explore some of Europe's most captivating wine regions. We're going to uncover some hidden gems and also discuss the importance of the European Union in safeguarding the food and beverage traditions of these beautiful European countries. So for this tasting, we have chosen 3 bottles from the EU with the themes of bringing back special memories, places we would love to go and explore and visit, as well as wines we want to learn a little bit more about. So before we kick off this lovely tasting, Nicole, tell us a little bit more about yourself. Introduce yourself to us.
Yes. Hi, everyone. So I'm Nicole Muscari, and I am very excited to be working with the European Union as a storyteller this year for their More Than Food and Drink Savoring Stories campaign. This is funded by the European Union to promote European agricultural food and beverage products in the US. This campaign is themed around the authenticity, quality, safety, and sustainability around these products. And I just think that the wines we're about to taste are an incredible example of all of these things. So I'm really excited to dive in.
That's great. And just for everybody out there, because I think we throw the name around a little bit, but could you just kind of, how would you describe the European Union? What is that?
That is a really, really good question, actually. So the European Union, or the EU, is a union of 27 European countries who basically share common values. So these things like freedom, democracy, rule of law, all of these kinds of things. I know it can kind of be hard to think of a whole bunch of countries as like one entity, but it's been really interesting for me working with this campaign to learn all about the food and beverage practices that are shared throughout the EU. And, an example would be like their super high quality standards.
Right. Yeah, and that's good. That kind of helps everybody kind of meet those same high quality standards. So perfect. Well, let's get into the wines. So we're going to start with some sentimental nostalgia, so wines that bring back memories. Nicole, which European wine did you choose that holds these special memories for you?
Okay, so this is actually really near and dear to my heart. Last summer, my husband and I actually closed on an apartment in Porto, Portugal. So because of this, I have a really strong connection with port wines. I just think they're incredible. So I'm going to go ahead and pour myself. I have here a tawny port.
Mm-hmm.
So these fortified wines are usually aged in oak barrels, especially for the tawnies here. They're usually super complex. They range from all sorts of styles. So you have dry styles, ruby styles, tawny. They go really super sweet. But what I love about these wines, especially for me, because it's such a sentimental thing for me, is just every time I smell this wine, which is so delicious, it immediately brings me back to being in my friend's living room, sitting around a table. Sometimes it brings me to my favorite restaurant, like that's nestled on the Douro River, kind of overlooking the Rebello boats. So yeah, it's just really, really special. So I'm going to go ahead and take a quick sniff here and pull out a couple tasting notes.
Okay, great. You do that. I also love port. We'll just throw that out there while you're doing that, of just kind of the balance that it has and like the complexity that it shows too.
Absolutely. So this one, it's all about those dried fruit notes, the dried strawberry, dried plum. I'm getting a little bit of spice here, maybe a little bit from the oak, some sweet spice. Ooh, rhubarb is something I'm getting here, which I really love. And a little bit of nuttiness here from some oxidation. So I'm going to go ahead and taste the wine.
Okay.
Mm. So for me, what I love about these wines are on the palate, there's always this beautiful kind of dance between the acidity and the sweetness. They're always in just such harmonious balance. Everything is just very pronounced, kind of jumping out of the glass. As soon as it hits your palate, it just kind of glides through that kind of beautiful glycerol feeling, that full body, a little bit of warmth from this being a fortified wine. All of those beautiful notes that we had seen here on the nose are definitely coming through on the palate as well. Those beautiful bright dried fruits, some chocolate notes, a little bit of rhubarb, spice, sweet spice, all of that here just coming together. This is an outstanding wine, and it makes me smile because I feel like I'm back in Porto.
So wonderful. Yeah, that's actually on my, I mean, I'm going to talk about another travel place, but that's on my list also for travel. But I think Port is just also coming back to the European Union and the quality aspect. It's such a great example of unique authenticity and quality, just kind of showcasing that aspect.
I mean, I totally agree. So European wines to me, so like Port as an example, they're steeped in such rich history and local character. It's really an identity and in the DNA. So the unique combination of soil, climate, and grape varieties, which we can call terroir, if you will, in each region creates a very distinct flavor profile. So what's exciting is that the EU protects these unique characteristics through quality schemes. So we have things like the PDO, which is the protected designation of origin. And we also have PGI, which is protected geographical indication. So when you choose a wine with the PDO or PGI label, you're getting a genuine product that really reflects that origin and their production methods.
Yep, and that kind of quality assurance is totally important and vital to maintaining trust in consumers to know that they are getting that quality product with the sign of approval from the European wine.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these regulations are in place through, if you think about it, the entire supply chain. So anything from grape cultivation in the vineyard all the way to bottling, consumers of EU products can really trust that the sustainability and the safety of what they're purchasing, is there under these labels. So part of it is for me, when I'm in Porto, I love going to local shops and grocery stores and supermarkets because of this and finding things with these PGI labels.
Yep, perfect. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've chosen a wine for my memory as well. So mine goes back to Burgundy, and specifically white wines from the Rougon PDO. So I traveled to Burgundy right after college with my parents. Wasn't just like, oh, I'm gonna go to Burgundy, but their friends were getting married there, and so we were in the Beaune region of Burgundy, and I was kind of tagging along. And at that point, I'd had wine, but when I thought of Chardonnay, I kind of thought of like just bigger, richer, more heavily oaked kind of American style Chardonnay at the time. So when we would go to a cafe and I would just order a white wine by the glass, I was just kind of blown away. I mean, it was just this beautiful, unique, balanced, food friendly, complex, but yet just easy drinking wine that just any cafe I went to over and over, I'm like, yes, I'll have a carafe of white. Yes, yes, carafe of the blanc. Yes. And I just kind of fell in love. And I feel like I still owe that kind of that moment or that week, I guess, of really introducing me to this level of quality, but also kind of the spark that kind of put me into discovering more and getting into the wine business in general. So giving a little tasting to this. What I would love about the Bourgogne whites and that PDO is just the really kind of crisp freshness of fruit that you get, like that green apple, that kind of lemon citrus. It's just a brightness that comes out in the nose that I love.
Yeah, these wines are so delicious. And I just love, I mean, that story was beautiful. And I feel like I also have so many of those stories from all of my time spent in the EU as well. So it is really special. I can relate.
It is. I mean, it's all about the stories, but in this palette, I love the zing of acidity, but again, you have that wonderful, beautiful texture that you want from a Chardonnay, and that kind of just a little bit of that honeysuckle coming through, and just that kind of weight that you want that's balanced with the acidity. It's never disappoint. Again, you can just hop around Burgundy with a carafe of blanc and just be happy with all your food choices, your wine choices. It's that wonderful, delicious note.
Oh, absolutely. That sounds So good. And I love how, I mean, there's always something new to learn with European wines as well. So we all know that, Europe makes fantastic wine, but the efforts made to protect and promote tradition and a sense of place, to me, are what really make wines from Europe so special and have so much quality to them. So question for you from me would be, what are you pairing with this? Like, what is your food pairing that you love with this wine?
Well, when I can and I have the motivation and everything, I love steamed clams. Especially as I tasted that, I wanted something kind of like salty and briny, but also a really good cheese plate. I will take that with any good cheese plate because that's a little bit more easy for me to sometimes throw together. So that and honestly, like anything with like just grilled chicken, pasta dishes, it just has kind of a really array of things to eat with. I feel like it's a spring and summer and fall wine. And yeah, I just everything.
Absolutely. Oh,
Yeah. And I
great.
love that also, like, I feel like Burgundy too, because Burgundy is so steeped in tradition. And you can kind of see that in the wines. They take such great pride in the wines they create and make, and just all of their traditions that they have. And then, you have the Bourgogne PDO white and red, but you also have Bourgogne Rousseau PDO. You have the Cremant de Bourgogne, which I have been drinking a lot of. That's the sparkling wine from there. And then there's also Bourgogne Aligoté, which another white that I also love. And Bourgogne Pas Tout Grand. I think I'm saying Pas Tout Grand PDO, which is a blend. It's like blended reds and rosés and just kind of think fruity and summery and fun. So
There's
all sorts of things going on.
Yeah, there's always something new to learn here
Yeah.
because, not a lot of people have heard of Patu Grand. I mean,
No.
I've heard it maybe a handful of times.
Yeah.
And it's just great because, again, there's just always something new to
Yeah.
discover.
Absolutely. Definitely. Okay, so we are going to hear about your next bottle, which will be somewhere you would like to explore, somewhere you'd like to visit. So which European wine region are you thinking there?
Okay, so I am dying to go to Austria. I have yet to go. I consider myself to be a well-traveled wine professional, and I still have yet to get to Austria. So the next best thing, in my opinion, is to travel through the wine glass. So that's what we're going to do here. So I have my wine here. So Austria, let's talk a little bit about it. So Austria is going to boast this really beautiful, diverse terroir and range of styles. So you have whites like Gruner Veltliner, which is actually what I have here. But you also have, beautiful red wines from grapes like Zweigelt. And it's particularly exciting because Austrian wines often represent this kind of blend between innovation and tradition. And here in Austria, their main focus is really on sustainability. So I'm really eager to experience these eco-conscious practices firsthand by getting into this wine. A lot of examples of this will be things like limited or reduced herbicide use, a lot of water conservation here, plus a lot of focus on renewable energy and kind of lowering the carbon footprint. Plus, I love a good hike. So,
Yeah, Austria. Yeah, like Sound of Music. They were hiking a lot in Sound of Music, right? Exactly.
So
No, yeah, sounds amazing.
I'm going to go ahead and give this a little smell here.
Absolutely.
Uh, so this to me is like such textbook Gruner Veltliner from Austria. I'm getting just all these beautiful green notes. So green apple, a little bit of lime, also that classic Rotundone white pepper, which if you can pick it up in a blind tasting is always like, a little bit of a bullseye. Not everyone can pick it up, but this one is really showing beautifully. And it kind of has this like really great, like herbaceous tone to it. Not super green, but just kind of adding a little bit to the complexity.
Yeah. So I did want to also ask you just from a pairing perspective, because one thing I love about Gruner Veltliner, it's one wine that I really like to have with artichokes, because artichokes are sometimes really hard to pair. And Gruner Veltliner seems to like be able to hold up to it. So do you have any favorite food pairings with Gruner Veltliner, which is known as a food wine, right?
Yes. So I have a few. So for me, people ask me all the time, especially when it comes to like salads and vegetables, root vegetables, they're actually really hard to pair.
Mhm.
But for me, I will always say a Gruner Veltliner from Austria. And specifically, this one is from the Niederösterreich, which is PDO in Northeast Austria. So those kind of like subtle herbaceous tones that I was talking about really kind of work parallel with those, green leafy vegetables, the salads. We're heading into summer, like you said. So it's kind of like salad season. I'm here in New York, so big brunch and lunch culture. West Village, sitting outside with your salad, like the Gruner Veltliner from Austria, definitely a way to go for that.
Way to go. Yeah. And you were talking about sustainability as well. So I know that the European Union also has like a farm to fork strategy that promotes sustainable practices in agriculture. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So that definitely benefits the quality and sustainability of European wines like this. So the farm to fork strategy promotes these sustainable practices, as well as biodiversity and a focus on quality and consumer trust, kind of all roped together there. So we've talked a little bit about that already. But for this wine in particular, this could look something like reduced chemicals for grape growing, some energy efficient winemaking, or even recyclable packaging.
Oh, good. That's fascinating. That's great.
Yes.
Cool. Well, it reminds me how much I love Gruner Veltliner. So
yes. So where have you chosen to travel today?
I on my list for so long as I'm going to Greece. I really want to go to Greece. So I'm a fan of all the wines that it takes a little while for everybody to learn to pronounce, but all the wines there are just fantastic. But I'm really currently into Zino Mavro, which is a red grape from there. And it comes mostly from Nausa, which is an island PDO kind of southeast from Athens. So I love introducing this wine to people who enjoy Pinot Noir and Barbaresco because there's something about it that has similar characteristics of those kinds of two wines, but yet it's so uniquely different on its own.
Totally.
So because this offers all that really great red fruit, that kind of ripe red fruit that comes through, but then you also have these wonderful like floral overtones.
I love these wines actually so much.
Yeah, once you discover them, you're like, oh, I'm hooked. But the palate, again, it gives you that medium bodied with really great acidity, but you know how that Nebbiolo, like the Barbaresco, will have that kind of tannin, that grippingness. You get a little bit of that as well. There's notes of earth, there's notes of spice, there's minerality to them. It kind of, it equally begs for another sip, but it also kind of begs for some food as well. It's such a great food wine with all those wonderful kind of components of that acidity and the little tannins and the minerality going on. So yeah, I find this to be a fascinating grape that is just so interesting and delicious.
I mean, you make me feel like I'm there, so that's great. So would you say there are any like special winemaking practices in Nausa? I mean, I know when we talk about Santorini, we automatically can kind of associate those like basket weaving.
Baskets, yeah. So this is a little bit easier going, not quite as labor intense, I guess, of going into places like Santorini, also Assortico, like wine. White wine. So, but Neuss, just like, a lot of winemaking regions, they really emphasize safety. They use natural pest management practices like pheromone, beneficial insects, and also kind of strict manufacturing practices that kind of help reduce bacteria and mold that might be there. So, so they're using all those kind of typical European Union safety standards.
And how about what like, in terms of additives here?
Yeah, I mean, again, like I feel like all across the European Union additives, they have regulations over, something like sulfur dioxide, which is a preservative, but there are regulations going on about how much can go in. So everything's kind of watched strictly, kind of monitored to make sure that kind of it provides that safety and the quality. But like you said, it's a lot of what's going around. It's what's common and standard across Europe.
Definitely. And I mean, you could say Greece has been around. They've had some time to figure it out.
They have. Yep, they certainly have. So yeah, that's a place that you might not be as familiar with them, but these are wines that I always enjoy discovering.
Absolutely, I love it.
Okay, so for our third wine, we are looking at regions we want to learn more about. And since we've both studied wine a lot, we've probably studied a lot of places, but I think there's always somewhere that we kind of like, oh, I I'm going to dive in a little bit more and see and expand my knowledge on. So tell us about your choice for this.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm also studying for a really huge exam, which is next week. So this is optimal time to be tasting through something I want to learn more about. And that is the wines of Hungary.
Yeah.
So they have this fascinating grape called Ferment. And Ferment is known for producing anything from dry white wines with beautiful minerality and this refreshing acidity. But it can also be used to make their famous dessert wine, which is Tokai, which is what I have here.
That is great. And this Tokai is a PDO. And okay, so protected designation of origin, we have touched on this. Kind of, I mean, I'm aware of the differences, but if you could maybe explain that for everyone, that difference, or kind of describing PDO and PGI and the difference and what they mean.
Absolutely. So basically, in short, you have PDO, which is protected designation of origin. So this is going to indicate a product intrinsically linked to its specific origin. So that's going to go through all stages of production happening in that region. So such as the Tokai, right? So PGI, which is protected geographical indication, which is a little bit different, it does offer a little bit of flexibility. So while the grapes or key ingredients might come from a specific region, some productions can actually occur elsewhere. So it's a little bit more lenient that way. So think like, for an example, I keep always going back to Portugal, Terras de Sister, which is Portugal's first sparkling PGI wine. So the grapes will actually come from the region, but the certain practices like riddling or disgorgement, etc., those things can actually happen elsewhere. So there's that a little bit of flexibility there.
But they both have that quality standard for each of what they're doing.
Yep.
Excellent. Okay, makes a lot of sense. So, what is it about Tokai and the Hungarian Tokai that makes you want to learn more?
Oh, well, I will tell you that, and then I'm going to share my notes because I'm like, it's so delicious. Okay, so why I'm so interested in this is a lot of it has to do with history. So we were talking a lot about stories in the beginning, and obviously history is such a big part of wine stories. So, this history is dating back to the 1600s. And if you think about it, that's at a time before, the US was founded as we know it today. So it's definitely, a place that's been around for a very, very long time. So, just kind of thinking about how we're tasting something that people so long ago tasted is like one of the things that I absolutely adore about wine. And so they're also here in Hungary champions of organic winemaking practices here, which, I also am. I care a lot about my health and those kinds of things. So something that I always really look for. They also are using a lot of those traditional winemaking practices that they've used for hundreds of years, especially in these really established regions, and kind of also leaning towards those low intervention methods.
That's great. And you're tasting this, you're going to come up with all these things, and I love it. Tell us about what's on the nose.
Okay, so on the nose, it's honey straight off the bat. So I'm getting a ton of honey, dried apricot, a little bit of marmalade, a little bit of orange peel or orange blossom. Ooh, it smells sweet. So I'm gonna go in.
Yeah, I know. And I'll just say that Tokai is one of those wines that whenever I think, I'm like, I'm not really into dessert wine. And then I taste it, I'm like, oh, I do. I like dessert wines. I just like really, really good dessert wines.
It's so good. All of those things that was, really popping out on the nose. Oh, and I'm still salivating. So excuse me. So the acidity here is meant to be high. That's a really kind of hallmark of ferment. So you have this high acid grape, but you have this sweetness, this sugar, and those two, again, kind of like how we talked about with the tawny port, in beautiful balance. So the wine doesn't feel cloying; it feels very fresh. But yeah, all of those notes kind of carrying through. But now you have this kind of honeyed, dried fruit sweetness on the palate. It's really delicious. But yeah, I'm so glad that you're loving Ferment Tokai as much as me, and the history, of winemaking in Europe really coincides with a really deep understanding of natural viticultural practices, which I think lead to a wealth of expertise and regulation within the EU organic wine sector. So I also chose this wine. I'm going to bring it back over here because I'm also eager to learn more about how these unique Hungarian sweet wines can pair with food. So it's fun to experience that too, because there's a lot more you can do with sweet wine than what people think.
Yeah, and I feel like Eastern Europe, the wines we're finally starting to see more and more of them coming to the U.S. And I love that because when I've had my first dry ferment, I was like, oh, this is also amazing. This is great. So I love that we're getting exposed to all of that.
Yeah. So what would you pair with this sweet Tokai?
Oh, that's a great question. There are some. I remember once having one, and it was toast with like a triple cream cheese, also European, with like cherry compote on top. But I feel like for this, I would prefer like almost a marmalade compote or some sort of honeyed thing, but with the cheese, like something really salty as well and creamy to kind of offset the acidity. But something along those lines.
I love that because there's this misconception that sweet wines can only be paired with dessert. But it's so untrue. And like you said, kind of doing something more savory, rich, I think is amazing. So,
Yeah.
Ooh, okay. So
fried foods, always love sweet wines.
oh yeah, that's also a really good point.
I do like it would be great with fried chicken. I mean, I know it's kind of mixing it up there, but there's something about that saltiness that really goes well with the sweet.
Yeah, I love that. Okay,
Yeah.
So what about you?
Okay, so I have chosen the something from Ribera del Duero in Spain. So I've had a good amount of wines from there, but not recently. And I remember just when I was thinking about this question of which wine, I was like, gosh, I haven't. This is a place I used to love or drink more of, and I realized I really kind of want to dive into knowing more. So it's known for Tempranillo, but the locals, they call it Tinto Fino. And I mean, that's really fitting because the grape just has its own super unique expression from this land. And you touched on that terroir aspect. And Ribera del Duero, I feel like, is just its own place. It's got these really well draining soils, it's got an abundance of sunlight. And it really just kind of provides these wines with really ripe fruit flavors, but also just unique, kind of unparalleled flavor profile in a way. So yeah.
And absolutely. And just to kind of, add on there, we're just up the Douro River, which is the Douro in Portugal. I keep going back to Portugal, but and so
we're coming full circle.
We're coming full circle here. We're just up. It's the same river. It changes names, but
yep.
Really. But what's amazing and interesting to think about when you look at it on a map is that these wines produced just further down from the valley in Portugal. I mean, they're different, and so that factor of authenticity really comes through with each of these wines from Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that sense of place, I think, is such a big hallmark of European wines, and wines of the European Union are just really embracing that. Like, this is where I'm from, and that's what I show you in the glass. And so this does have that beautiful, big, dark and red fruit, just all sorts of kind of a giant fruit basket of sorts in there, but also a little bit of spice. And on that palate again, like the big fruit, but then you have the kind of a earthy mineral undertone going on. It's got great tannins, but they're smoother tannins. They're not too gripping. They're really just beautiful, kind of balancing out the mouthfeel there. This is a wine, and I always like to talk about wines of how I recommend them, or like if somebody loves one wine, I'll be like, oh, you should try this. So this is one that I often recommend to people who really love bigger wines, cabs, that sort of thing, because it has that structure and that kind of muscle behind it with all that wonderful fruit, but it's just kind of uniquely its own.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think there's, like I mentioned before, there's definitely a really special authenticity that you can feel when you travel anywhere within Europe. So especially, visiting wineries, tasting wine, and every time, I take a sip, whether it be from Ribera del Duero or, Tokai or wherever, it's like you really are transporting through the wine glass.
Right. And you had also mentioned history, and this has so much history to it. And I was a history major, so I feel like wine just exemplifies the history because they all have these wonderful stories behind them. So this has Spanish royalty that used to drink them back in the 1100s. And now when you visit there, you have like the Golden Mile where you can go and visit, where tourists can travel between wineries there. So, and yes, like you said, it champions that authenticity. And it celebrates kind of the indigenous varieties from there, the Tinto Fino, and it protects traditions like family-owned wineries and long barrel aging. And I feel like that all adds to what makes it such a wonderful wine.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you. And honestly, come to think of it, you know, between all of these wines that we kind of went through, I think we did a pretty good job kind of tasting through all of those four pillars of the European Union wines. So, they really focus again on that authenticity, the quality, safety, and sustainability. So I feel like with each wine we went through, I mean, there was so much to talk about there.
Yeah, absolutely. Indeed, we did. I mean, they kind of spoke for themselves too. I mean, it's not hard. These qualities just, yeah, speak for themselves. So, also, just so everyone knows, Wine.com just launched the Wine.com European Union wines map that allows people to show to kind of show all wines from 27 member countries or the 27 member states of the EU, kind of in a fun, interactive way. So, if you're curious to explore these hidden gems we've mentioned, you should definitely check that out on Wine.com. And you can follow this campaign on Instagram or LinkedIn, I believe, the at More Than Food US. Is that correct, Nicole?
Yes.
Anything you want to add to that?
Food US on Instagram and LinkedIn. And
Great.
you will all follow along. I'll be with this campaign for the foreseeable future. So we're really excited to really kind of get out there and share these incredible products.
Fantastic. Well, Nicole, thank you so much for being here today on behalf of the European Union and sharing the stories. It's been a lot of fun sipping wine with you.
Of course, thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast, and cheers, everyone.